Have you ever
Excuse me.
paused to consider
When
just
they
how
don't see
fragile our sense of
you
security
so
can
like
be
this, they
when
go,
prejudice
boo,
masquerades as
yo.
procedure? Over the course of a 10-day undercover audit dubbed Operation Blue Shield, I personally reviewed more than 120 detailed incident reports at Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, an average of 12 per day. Of those, 42% documented failures to follow ID verification protocols, 18% involved biased or discriminatory remarks, and the remaining 40% revealed lapses in basic safety procedures. Those numbers alone paint a disturbing portrait of an operation that values on-time departures over the dignity and rights of its passengers. After days immersed in that data, I thought the 2-hour flight home to Washington, D.C. would finally offer a quiet respite. Instead, it became the catalyst for a reckoning no one saw coming. I arrived at Gate B32 with my backpack slung over one shoulder. Inside, nothing but my laptop, a well-worn novel, and the thick folder of findings that would soon upend Ascending Airlines' entire Atlanta hub. Around me, the gate area was a mosaic of human stories. A family of 5 juggling carry-ons and car keys, a cluster of executives in sharply pressed suits, and an elderly couple sharing a bag of peanuts. At the counter stood Carla Simmons, the station's lead gate agent for 7 years, whose record included 14 formal complaints, 11 of them involving minorities who felt demeaned or delayed. In the past month alone, she'd received 3 passenger grievances citing microaggressions. Yet no corrective action had ever stuck, because management prioritized efficiency metrics over human decency. When the first-class boarding call crackled overhead, "First-class passengers, please present boarding passes and valid government-issued ID." Carla's platinum bob swiveled toward me. She scanned my boarding pass, then my passport, with a disdain that seemed rehearsed. "Passport for a domestic flight?" she sneered, voice loud enough that 15 heads turned. "You know you need a driver's license, right?" I had used that passport at 14 checkpoints during the audit, every time accepted without question. "This is valid government ID," I replied evenly. "May I board?" Her lips curved into a mocking smile. "Let me see it." She flipped to the photo page, squinted, then laughed short and sharp. "This picture looks happier. You look younger there." "Doctor of what?" "Let me guess. Women's studies?" I caught the flicker of triumph in her eyes, the same look I'd cataloged in dozens of incident reports as the hallmark of authority bias. "Aeronautical engineering," I said, "and the passport is current." In my 10 years as a field inspector, I've learned that tone rarely diffuses these situations. Precision and protocol do. Carla's smirk widened. "Or maybe it's fake. People like you are very resourceful." Her hand snapped out, seized the cover, and in one swift motion, tore the booklet in two. The tearing sound echoed unnaturally loud, freezing the airport's ambient hum. 52 passengers stood motionless, eyes glued to the blue fragments fluttering across the countertop. At that moment, the invisible traveler vanished. I felt the familiar surge of authoritative focus I reserve for emergencies. The ivory tower data gave way to a real-time crisis. 42% of ID verification failures could have escalated into security breaches. Yet here was a blatant felony playing out in front of dozens of witnesses. Mutilating a United States passport is punishable by up to 25 years in prison under Title 18, Section 1543. Quietly, I recited the code to myself, the weight of each word sharpening my resolve. "You have just destroyed federal property," I said, my voice measured to carry across the hush. "That is a felony, mutilation of a passport. Protocol requires you to scan the document with your UV light system, verify the micro-printing and holograms, and then, if doubts persist, escalate to a supervisor or airport security. Nowhere does it authorize you to rip it apart." Her triumphant posture faltered. "I was protecting the flight," she stammered. "It looks suspicious." "Your discretion is subordinate to federal law and your own airline's policy," I replied. "By ignoring the verification equipment built into your counter and substituting it with personal bias, you compromise security. Call your supervisor now and reverse this action." Instead, Carla stood silent, face pale as the two halves lay between us. I reached into my backpack, pulled out my phone, and dialed a single contact. "Director Reynolds," I said crisply, Code Black on Operation Blue Shield. I need TSA, the FBI liaison, and corporate legal at Gate B32 immediately. Preserve all camera footage and employee logs. Within seconds, two uniformed officers appeared at the edge of the boarding bridge, followed by two plainclothes federal agents. Carla's eyes went wide as she realized her moment of petty triumph had triggered a full-scale investigation. Captain Hayes, the pilot of Flight 1142, strode up the jet bridge. "What's happening here?" he demanded. I turned to him. "Your gate agent assaulted a federal inspector and destroyed a passport. This flight is grounded pending investigation." The captain's brow furrowed as he processed the gravity. More than 200 passengers stranded, regulations at stake, and an entire crew now under scrutiny. Carla was escorted aside for questioning. As I watched her shoulders slump, I couldn't help but calculate the broader implications. 120 reports, 18% explicitly citing discrimination, dozens of safety lapses left unaddressed. All because one employee felt empowered to wield prejudice as if it were policy. By the time I stepped away, the once fluid flow of travelers had morphed into a static tableau. Witnesses milling at a safe distance, officers securing evidence bags, and auditors retrieving security footage. The fragments of that passport, one of the 22 million issued by the State Department each year, were now the linchpin in a case that would expose systemic failures across an entire hub. Looking back, I'm struck by the dissonance between Carla's moment of so-called protection and the real danger she created. In practical terms, tearing that passport didn't remove a threat. It invited one. Every statistic I'd uncovered in Operation Blue Shield pointed to the same conclusion. Unchecked bias isn't just a moral failing, it's a direct threat to safety and security. As I finally made my way to the terminal exit, a low swell of satisfaction mixed with fatigue settled over me. Not because I'd humiliated Carla or grounded a flight, but because the metrics, from complaint percentages to verification failure rates, had been validated in the most undeniable way possible. Prejudice left unchecked begets chaos. Procedure ignored begets peril. In my experience, real change always begins at a single breaking point. Here, that point was a snap decision that shredded a passport, but it triggered an audit that will demand corrective action, oversight, and accountability. And for every 120 incident reports compiled, there should be 120 opportunities to get it right. If you've ever doubted that one person's integrity can shift an entire system, remember Gate B32. Remember that in the face of protocols bent by personal bias, adherence to law and data is the ultimate safeguard. And never underestimate the power of statistics when they intersect with real-world courage and the determination to ensure that no one is ever invisible again. Have you ever seen how a single spark can ignite an entire network of failures? Within 2 hours of Gate B32's incident, I had assembled a team of 8 FAA investigators, 4 forensic auditors, and 2 NTSB liaisons in a commandeered conference room at Ascendair's Atlanta headquarters. We moved with calculated urgency. Every second mattered when we suspected a web of systemic noncompliance. Our first step was data collection. By 6 p.m., we had secured complete logs from the previous 30 days, 4,872 boarding pass scans, 1,328 passport inspections, and 912 visa waiver checks. Of those, we identified 37 instances, 4.2%, where gate agents bypassed the built-in UV scanners or failed to escalate borderline cases to supervisors. Even more troubling, 22 of those 37 incidents involved passengers of color. That disparity, over 59%, stood in stark contrast to the overall demographic mix, where non-white travelers accounted for just 28% of boardings. The numbers didn't lie. Bias was baked into the process. Next, we turned to complaint records. HR provided us with 7 years of files encompassing 236 formal grievances against gate personnel at the Atlanta hub. We loaded them into our analytics engine and ran a keyword frequency analysis. Terms like demeaned, insulted, and questioned credentials appeared 74 times. We discovered that 62% of those complaints had been resolved informally, meaning the agent received no documented retraining or disciplinary action. In other words, for every 5 complaints lodged, 3 agents walked away with nothing more than a stern conversation and no change in behavior. Armed with these statistics, we conducted interviews. I sat down with 6 gate agents, all veterans of at least 3 years on the job, and asked about their understanding of the ID verification protocol. Only 2 could accurately describe all 4 mandatory steps. 1. Scan boarding pass. 2. Inspect photo quality and microprint under UV light. 3. Verify name and expiration dates against passenger records. And 4. Escalate unresolved doubts. 4 agents admitted they sometimes skipped the UV inspection to keep the line moving, estimating that skipping saved them an average of 12 seconds per passenger. In a terminal handling 1,200 boardings per hour, that's a time gain of 4 hours each day, but at the cost of security. During a debrief, I reflected on an observation that no amount of numerical insight alone could capture. The culture of expediency had quietly eclipsed every safeguard designed to protect the flying public. One supervisor offhandedly told me, "If the passenger looks clean and their documents look legit, why bother with the light? We have flights to push." That casual shrug encapsulated the root problem. When profits and on-time metrics overshadow protocol, even well-intentioned employees become complicit in risk. While the interviews continued, our forensic accountants cross-referenced maintenance logs with flight records. We discovered 14 instances in the past 6 months where critical safety checks were signed off without evidence of physical inspection. Each skipped inspection represented an 11% chance of latent mechanical issues going undetected. Risks that, if multiplied by 500 daily departures, could translate into a major incident within a year. One memorandum in the system cheekily noted, "Mechanic out sick, signed off by admin," a cavalier shorthand for "we're understaffed." By midnight, our scope had grown from a single gate agent incident to a full-scale operational review. The gate scuffle had been the catalyst. The real crisis was the structural erosion of compliance. I reviewed the numbers. 4.2% procedural bypass, 59% demographic bias in those bypasses, 62% of complaints unresolved, 14 safety-critical inspections falsified. Each metric painted a piece of the larger mosaic of risk. In the early hours of the morning, I convened a meeting with Ascendair's top compliance officer and their VP of operations. Presenting the data, I didn't mince words. Your hub is operating under a fragile veneer of efficiency. Remove that veneer, and what's left is prejudice and procedural neglect. They sat in stunned silence as I laid out the blueprint for corrective action. A comprehensive retraining program for all 210 gate agents. The installation of automated UV scanner logs to flag any skipped inspections in real time. A mandatory escalation threshold if more than 2% of daily documents fail initial verification, and a zero-tolerance policy for any discrimination-related complaints. Implementing those measures would cost an estimated $2.7 million in training, technology upgrades, and staffing adjustments. But weighed against potential fines, FAA penalties can reach up to $30,000 per infraction, and the reputational cost of a major safety incident, the investment was non-negotiable. Ascendair's executives agreed to a 60-day remediation window, after which we would re-audit all protocols. By 10 a.m., the local media had picked up the story, "FAA audit halts Ascendair's Atlanta hub." Social media impressions on Twitter and Facebook exceeded 1.2 million in the first 12 hours, with 78% of posts condemning Ascendair's practices. One viral clip, anonymized footage of Carla Simmons shredding the passport, garnered over 2 million views and spurred Touchdown Safe Skies Now campaigns across major news outlets. When public trust tanks, the bottom line follows swiftly. Ascendair's stock fell 14% in a single trading session, wiping out nearly $450 million in market value. Stepping back, I couldn't help but reflect on the dual power of numbers and narrative. Data gives us scope. Human stories give us impact. Standing in that conference room, watching executives confront cold metrics, I felt the same sense of urgency I'd experienced in the cockpit of an airline. because lives, corporate reputations, and governmental oversight all depended on translating statistics into action. Conclusion and personal reflection. Chapter 2 illustrates how a moment of individual bias can serve as the fuse for a much larger system failure. Quantitatively, we uncovered that 1 in 24 document inspections was compromised, two-thirds of complaints went unaddressed, and dozens of safety checks were superficially rubber-stamped. Qualitatively, those numbers revealed a culture that had quietly accepted prejudice and procedural shortcuts as the price of operational speed. For me, the most sobering realization was that compliance isn't a checkbox. It's a mindset. It demands constant vigilance, not just automated systems or high-level policies. And when people begin to believe that looking the part substitutes for actual verification, they endanger everyone on board. As an investigator, I'm trained to follow the data, but I'm also reminded that data alone doesn't change hearts and minds. It takes transparency, accountability, and a willingness at every level to prioritize human dignity, even when it costs time and money. By the time dawn broke over Atlanta, the first phase of Ascendair's 60-day remediation plan was already in motion. Bright posters detailing each step of the ID verification protocol, boarding pass scan, UV inspection, data page review, supervisor escalation, lined the walls of every gate area. Newly installed scanner logs pinged to a centralized dashboard in real time, flagging any skipped steps with a flashing red alert. A rotating roster of FAA instructors, accompanied by senior gate agents who'd volunteered for ambassador roles, led interactive workshops on implicit bias. Agents shared personal stories. A single mother who'd been unfairly delayed on her honeymoon flight, a veteran who'd felt humiliated by extra screening. Those testimonials shook the room harder than any policy memo. By week 2, the hard numbers began to shift. Incidents of protocol bypass fell from 4.2% to 1.1%. Complaints citing discourtesy or discrimination dropped by 45%. More importantly, gate agents reported feeling safer and more empowered to speak up when they saw a colleague slip. One young agent confessed in a workshop, "I used to rush past the UV light because I thought no one would notice. Now I realized skipping it was like leaving a door unlocked." Her honesty brought nods of understanding and a collective resolve to do better. Midway through the 60-day period, I walked Gate B32 again, this time not as an undercover inspector, but as a mentor. Carla Simmons was there too, back behind the counter for the first time since her suspension. Her stance was subdued, her platinum bob tucked behind one ear. She greeted each first-class passenger respectfully, scanning IDs methodically. When a harried traveler misplaced her boarding pass, Carla calmly offered assistance instead of condescension. Watching that transformation, I felt a surge of cautious optimism. People can change when given structure, accountability, and a chance to learn from their mistakes. Behind the scenes, data analysts continued to pull every thread. They discovered that, beyond gate security, Ascendair's Atlanta maintenance crews had completed 98% of required inspections on schedule, a dramatic improvement from the 85% compliance rate 3 months earlier. Flight delays due to mechanical flags dropped by 27%. Passenger satisfaction scores climbed too. The courtesy of staff metric rose to 4.5 out of 5, a record high for the hub. When the CEO visited in week 8, she found an atmosphere of renewed professionalism. At a town hall meeting, she thanked the agents. "You've turned a crisis into an opportunity. By embracing higher standards, you've kept our passengers safer and our reputation intact." As day 60 approached, I compiled the final dossier. Protocol compliance, 99.2%. Discrimination complaints, down 68%. Maintenance-related delays, down 27%. Staff satisfaction, up 22%. Passenger trust index, up 18%. These figures told one clear story. Systematic change was possible. Yet numbers alone can't capture the human heartbeat behind them. In the last workshop, I invited a dozen passengers, representing diverse backgrounds, to share how the changes had affected them. An Afro-Latina lawyer described feeling seen and respected when her documents were handled courteously. A Sikh engineer recounted relief when staff asked, "How can we assist you?" instead of, Are you a security risk? Their words echoed in the room, infusing dry statistics with the warmth of genuine connection. A stronger ending. On the final morning, Gate B32 was calm and efficient. A young black mother boarded first class with her toddler. Carla Simmons smiled warmly as she placed the child's boarding pass into the scanner. Nearby, the toddler pointed at Carla's name badge and giggled. Carla winked back, momentarily at ease. That simple exchange spoke volumes. Trust rebuilt, prejudice dismantled, a shared moment of humanity in the rhythm of routine. As I watched, I felt a swell of emotion. Gratitude for the agents who embraced change. Indignation at the biases that allowed the crisis to erupt in the first place. And hope for the countless travelers whose journeys would now be safer and more dignified. The final lesson of Operation Blue Shield is that no protocol can succeed without people willing to uphold it with respect and compassion. When we treat one another with basic decency, we don't just comply with regulations. We affirm each other's worth. If this story leaves you inspired, angry, or determined to make a difference, remember this. Every time you step up and insist on fairness, whether by pausing to verify an ID or speaking out against mistreatment, you become part of the solution. Change isn't delivered by algorithms or memos alone. It's forged in the everyday decisions that affirm our shared humanity. Let Gate B32 stand as a testament to the power of accountability, training, and empathy, and as a call to action for us all.